Welcome to Kingdomize the podcast, where we discuss how to see our lives and our world through a kingdom lens, how to infuse kingdom culture into our families, our workplaces, and our cities, as we all participate in the dream of Jesus to see his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven.
Hey, welcome. This is the Kingdomize Global podcast. We're pleased to be with you today. We're a group of people that believe that the kingdom needs to come now. My name is Ian Green. I'm the president of Kingdomize Global, and today we have one of our founding members, Dr. Brian Beattie, who is joining us on this podcast. He's an exciting man with incredible stories, with lots of good content to share with us. And so, Brian, welcome. It's so good to have you today.
Hey, Ian, great to be with you. Love doing life and ministry with you. So, yeah, looking forward to today. I'm excited about my story.
That's good. That's good. Look, I've used some of your story, and it is a really good. We go back 34 years, so we've known each other a long time. We've had a lot of time musing, chatting, drinking coffee, hanging out. It's been great. And I just want you to share with some of our guests some of the things that I've really enjoyed and have found it incredibly helpful and beneficial in my life and ministry and business. And so, Brian, why don't you just share a little bit about who you are, your background, your family, so we can get to know you a little better.
Yeah. So I'll start with the family. So married in 85. So married for a bunch of years. I can't do math. So 38 years, I guess, today. Now, 3 kids. Rennick is the oldest, 29. Braden is 27. Vanessa is 17. Lovely humans. They're wonderful. We enjoy family very much. A lot of laughter in our home, so we love that. I would say, as far as going back even further to family, brought up in a great family. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. Most people that meet us say, "Oh, you are the youngest." So I never take that as a compliment, but I'm okay with it. Youngest of 5. Wasn't raised going to church. My parents had stopped going to church before I was born, so I was kind of raised nothing. I was raised nothing. I was raised a human, but I do remember starting to go to youth group with friends. So this goes back to I was early teens, and as far as church world, it wasn't church yet. It was a youth group that I was going to, and I actually remember the first time I heard the gospel presented, the gospel of Jesus on the cross, and it was a guy. He was painting while he was talking, but you couldn't tell what he was doing, though, because he had the lights down low. But you knew he was painting. And when he was done painting, he told the story of Jesus on the cross and the 2 thieves beside him. And then when he was done, he turned on this black light, and he had been painting with these incredible colored paints that made the whole painting come alive. It was like, wow, it was like multicolored, vibrant. And I remember hearing him tell the story of Jesus. I went, oh, yeah, I believe that. What's next? How do I get involved? I've always been quite outgoing, wanting to do stuff. And I would say I carried that right into church world, because it wasn't long after that I started going to church with those same friends. And I jumped in immediately, doing stuff at the church. So probably sooner than I should have. but it was a small church, and they would use anyone with a heartbeat. So I'm for small churches. So I jumped in. I was teaching Sunday school, got involved in music, loved music. Basically, my teen years and high school years were sports and music. That's kind of where you'd find me. But in that process, got involved in the church at the time, and leading worship, that kind of thing, singing. We put a band together. We started traveling, and so that's kind of my early kind of upbringing. That's my kind of my teen years, and then went to Bible college right out of high school. Yeah.
Cool. What got you to go to Bible college? Why did you go on that trajectory if you were interested in sports and music?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't really on my trajectory. See, Bible college wasn't. All I wanted to do really was travel and sing. I'd come to the place that I knew that I wasn't good enough in sports to do that professionally, although I would have loved that. Um, I came to realize I couldn't do that, but I loved music. I was already traveling and singing, and actually, that's all I wanted to do. Back in my teen years, I just wanted to travel and sing and make that a profession. And so there was a group that came to one of our camps that was singing and traveling, and I talked to them. I said, I want to do what you guys do, and they said, well, you probably should go to Bible college because if you travel and sing, especially in churches or this kind of scenario, they're probably going to want you to speak, and they're going to want to make sure you say something that doesn't blow up the church. So you probably should go to Bible college and get some education behind you so you don't blow up churches while you travel. So, so that was really why I went to Bible college. I had no aspirations to do almost anything I'm doing today, but it was really, I just wanted to travel and sing.
So when you came out of Bible college, what happened? What did you do?
Yeah. So in Bible college, very involved in everything. So started a couple bands, got involved. Actually, the first year of Bible college, I was a youth pastor at my home church. The last year of Bible college, at least that period of Bible college, I was youth pastor and did worship at a church not far from the city where I went to Bible college, and just got very involved. Always very involved. Always felt like uh, I've always been a practitioner. I've always been, if this is true, do something about it. In fact,
Wow.
even when I first went to church and Bible college, I always wondered, why do all these people attend this place, but very few do the work? It always, from a young age, it always kind of bugged me that it seemed like a very small minority of people were actually doing something. And so that was just kind of my upbringing. That's who I was as a person. And so got involved in that. And even through Bible college, it was the way I was. Yeah.
So would you say you were pastoral, like you served in a few number of churches? So like, how did that work for you in terms of who
Yeah.
you are?
Sorry. I guess in an interview, I shouldn't start laughing while you're asking a question. However, uh, I came to learn, like back in the day, you were either a pastor or a teacher because that's kind of who you were. So I came to realize through my pastoring experience that I'm actually not a good pastor. I'm not pastoral at all. Like I'm a leader, I'm a visionary, uh, but pastoring wasn't kind of my bent. And so I did learn fairly quickly because after blowing up some things, I did learn I need to bring some people around me that are more relational than I am, that aren't just visionary and seeing stuff in the future. And so I learned both by necessity and by people talking to me that, there are other giftings in the Bible. You may want to bring some administrators around you. You may want to bring some pastoral type people around you because that will round out what you're doing. So that helped me stay employed in churches.
So okay, I know you pastored for a number of years, and probably I know one of the churches was the largest church at this time in Canada, in Toronto, which must have been quite an experience. But somehow, what happened? What changed for you? Because you moved from a pastoral dimension, probably some would describe it as a more of an apostolic dimension. What was the kind of surrounding circumstances that made that switch?
Yeah. So we were starting to connect with other people, hearing different theology. So I would say there's a number of catalysts in there. I would say meeting Tommy Barnett, who was at the time pastor of Phoenix First Assembly, meeting him and listening to him talk about how he ran his church, uh, going to numbers of his pastors' conferences and seeing what was happening there. And he was the first pastor I remember speaking of that it wasn't just about the pastor, the people on the platform, but how do we actually equip all the saints for the work of the ministry? And so when he would do this conference, he would have this, he called it a parade of ministries. And it wasn't like normal parades of ministries where it was like, okay, there's the kids ministry and there's the youth ministry, young adults, and there's the adults, there's the seniors, there's the babies. But he's like, there's the unwed mothers ministry, and there's the bikers church, and it was all the normal ones that we'd have in church. But then it was this list of basically whatever you could think of, those in the congregation, whatever they could think of that they felt God was calling them to do. He was saying, we're going to come alongside you. We're going to help you package that and make that a ministry, because there's a really good chance God's calling you to that. So that was late 80s. I would say, so coming to the church you're talking about in Toronto, it was about a year and a half after I went there that God gave me an open vision. Now, I'm already working through this. What does it mean to be, what is an apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher? I'm in the middle of those discussions with people, thinking through it myself. But then in the fall of 95, so on October, actually, exact date is October 8th, 1995, God gave me an open vision of his heart for cities. And the way this worked, and I won't go into great detail, but it was one of the things that changed the trajectory of my life full time, is that I'm in this vision. I'm not asleep. It's an open vision. I'm walking up to what is a cliff, and there's a gentleman sitting on a rock looking over this cliff. I don't know what he's looking at, looking at rather. And as I walk up to him, I come on an angle, and I can see him, and he's weeping. I know it's Jesus. I see him weeping, and I hear in my head, Jesus still weeps over the cities. As I hear that in my head, I look down over the cliff, and there's a city below, just as Jesus is looking at the city weeping. And then he walks me through a very detailed process of what's happening in the city, what's good about it, what's challenging about it. And then he speaks to me about my future, that he wants me to work with him and partner with him for the sake of city transformation. And again, as I said earlier, I'm a bit of a driven guy. I'm like, I get up and I'm like, God, let's do this. It's a great idea. And God says to me, you can't do it, Brian, because you love the idea more than you love the people.
Oh my God.
which is a bit of kick in the head from the Lord, if I'm honest about it. But he's God and he's right. So I went with that, which again, as that catalyst, it started me going, well, what does that mean? How do I process who I am? Because, I'm now, I'm 32, 33 at the time. I don't know that I'm going to change my internal makeup and how I think, but I have to put that under more kingdom thinking and rounding myself out better. And so that led me into, and not just me, my wife and I, we actually started looking at some things. And for her, the way it came out for my wife, she wrote for her doctorate, that we both got more education. Her doctorate was writing about how do you transform people. And her doctorate was on, it was actually called Freedom Encounter. Like, how do you actually transform people so they can do what God calls them to do? My doctorate, which we wrote around the same time, which I don't recommend to anyone, that there's two people writing their doctorates in the same house. That's a funky place to be. But that's another story. But mine was actually more on that city transformation. And it was more about, could this even happen? And so could we actually transform cities? So it was around that time. And then in that process met Ed Silvosa, which was very significant for us. So this is now May of 99, me, Ed Silvoso, and learn about what he's doing or had done. He had written his book called That None Should Perish. It was about what had happened in Argentina in the 70s, 80s, 90s, up to the present at that time. And it wasn't just about revivals. It wasn't just about we can have a good revival in a city or in a region. It was actually about, which they did, by the way. I mean, if you study the revivals in Argentina, specifically in the 80s, I mean, it is amazing. But it wasn't just that. It went beyond revival to what I would say is now Reformation, but it was city transformation. And when I heard him speak about transformation, city transformation, it was something leapt inside of me and said, well, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. So I've got the vision from 95. I've now got some language and real life. This can work. And we had already moved to Brantford, which God had called us to. And we felt like that was the city, that this was the city where God wanted us to do it.
Wow. So, when that would have been new thoughts, not only for you, like when you started talking these new thoughts to peers, other pastors, like what kind of response were you getting?
Yeah. So the idea of city transformation is very foreign. So I would say my, again, not brought up going to church, but my upbringing from that point, the church I was associated with, and maybe I would say almost most churches are their thinking is very church centric. So how do you build a church? How do you pastor this group of people? Uh, the Lord is now speaking to me way more about kingdom, and I'm starting to associate with some people that think that way, but there's not a lot. And in fact, I'll even say up until today, there's not tons of people that you can have dialogue about. It's not just about building this church or this business or this NGO. It's like, how does building that and creating a kingdom culture now affect your community, your city? And so I found it few and far between the people that you could do this with. Although the ones that I found, man, we had lots of great chats up until today. And so, but because of it, I knew that that's what I was supposed to do. So when we started our church in '03, we did it with these principles. We decided we were going to start a transformational church on purpose about how can we effectively stick our face in the middle of um, all the spheres of influence. So business, education, government, media. Uh, how can we do that in a way that brings kingdom culture there, that's powerful and effective and has impact? So that was kind of our thinking. We called Freedom House uh, a ministry center where church happens. So church Sunday was not going to be the focus, although it's important, but the focus was going to be getting the kingdom of God inside of people. So for wherever they went, it affected their sphere.
So, Brian, I mean, it's just that story of Freedom House, Brantford, is utterly inspiring and fascinating. Um, I've loved the documentary on it and probably showed it without exaggeration 100 times. And there's some really pivotal things in that video. I think one of the things that became obvious to me is that if you're going to become a kingdom person, then you actually have to be a collaborator because the job is too big for us to do it by ourselves. So how did that collaboration start to work for you when you moved to Brantford?
Yeah, yeah. So going back to meeting Ed Silvoso in '99, it was actually my wife and I, another pastor and his wife. So there was four of us that went to this conference. We came back to Brantford and brought the material. So Ed had written materials based on city transformation principles. He'd written uh, material. So we brought the material back to the pastors network at the time, and it was adopted quite readily. Like we started working together on that um, right through, I would say, right through the summer into the fall of '99. And then in the fall, so it was good news, except for in the fall, we're getting ready. Everyone's getting excited about year 2000. Woohoo! 2000 is coming. And if we can make it through Y2K, we're going to have a great next century if we can make it. So we start planning. So we're sitting in this pastors network, the ministerial, and we're talking now about doing a big event the next year. So the next year was going to be 2000. We wanted to celebrate. So we came up with a great name called Celebration 2000. Very creative. And I describe it this way: it was a great name and a terrible event. Because when we got to that event, we planned for months and we worked really hard. And we got to the event and we rented the biggest location in our city at the time, sat 3,000 people. I think our biggest attendance maybe at those evenings, 3 nights, was maybe 300. And
Oh my.
there's no reasonable thinking of why it should have happened. But the event just went terribly. Not enough people, lots of bills left over. And I'll tell you, getting getting people to re-engage in citywide stuff after that is very tricky. And I will say we had three similar events that blew up in front of us here in Brantford. But as you said, you're right. You can't do city transformation by yourself. It's not about a single church. It's not even if you got all the churches together as pastors, the pastors network is going to do it. That's not even enough. We came to find out over a number of years that you need the churches involved. You need to talk to the churches, but now how do you release the business people in that church, in those churches? How do you release the people that are called to education and government? Again, all the spheres, because it has to be an integrated approach, a collaborative, integrated approach to see anything significant happen. And so, although our story is great and it's a lovely video, getting to that video was, there were a few speed bumps, I would say, along the way.
I know that, during that process, one of the big pivotal points was connecting with the mayor and the politics of the city. Like, how did that help the process to go forward?
Yeah, I would say there were two significant things that happened, maybe three. So we had already had that mindset shift about kingdom. We were working that way. We realized that it wasn't about just the church, as we just explained. It's all of them. And we had already decided as Freedom House at the time, we had already decided that we are going to serve the city. That's part of who we are. Jesus came to serve and seek and save the lost. We were going to serve. We were intentionally, and more specifically, we were going to use kindness as the character, the piece of the character of God that we were going to lead within the city, both as an understanding of the gospel that we should be the kindest people in the city. We've got a head start as Christians because Holy Spirit lives in us, and the fruit of Him being there, one of them is kindness. So we should be the kindest people in the city. That kindness of the Lord, it says in Romans, it's the kindness of the Lord, Romans 2:4, that brings people to Him. So we wanted to lead with that, and because God led with kindness by sending His Son, so we want to do that. And it was really a need in our culture. Like, I would say our culture is friendly for the most part. We're, Canadians, we're known as being nice. But I think in our culture, what had happened, this is sociological dialogue that I won't get into, but we went as a culture from being front porch people to back deck people. So our parents and the parents before, you sit on your front porch and you talk to your neighbors. Well, what had happened in our culture was, I don't think we want to sit on the front porch and talk anymore. So we built these large decks and pools in our backyard for our privacy. And so we felt like we could change the culture with kindness. Just simple acts of kindness could kind of open the doorway. So it was that we were doing that. And through that, we started a kids club right in our neighborhood. The city heard about that, and then they had things they needed. So the city was doing Canada Day, probably our biggest or second biggest event in the city. And so we got a little bit known for doing our kids stuff. So they came to us. One of the ladies that we work with very closely, still do, Freedom House does to this day. Her name is Lori Dawn Cave. And Lori Dawn came to me and said, Brian, we really need help with Canada Day. Could Freedom House do the kids stage for Canada Day? And we already decided we're going to serve the city. So I said, sure, of course we'll do that. So we did that for a couple of years. And then the downtown, and Ian, you know the story, but for those listening, our city went through a major recession back in the 80s and 90s and into 2000s. And our downtown turned into a bit of a wasteland. And in fact, so much so that when my mom came to visit for the first time, so this goes back to 98, my mom came to visit for the first time. She goes, did a bomb go off in your downtown? Like, it was not a pleasant place. So our downtown's a bit of a wasteland. It's not good. No one wants to come downtown. But the city is into revitalizing. They want to revitalize the downtown. We intentionally want to do it. So we bought a bar in the downtown. And now Lori Dawn, we worked with her in Canada. Now Lori Dawn comes to us and says, we wanted to start doing some events in the downtown, in the square we built. Will you help us do what she was calling movies in the square? we said, of course, we'll help you. And so we did that for a couple of years. And then this is where the trajectory kind of took off, because after the second year of doing movies in the square, Lori Dawn came to me and said, Brian, do you think you guys could do a winter carnival? I said, of course we can do a winter carnival. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. I know nothing about winter carnivals. In fact, we found out how to do winter carnival by Googling it. We Googled winter carnival, and there was a group in Montreal that were doing great winter carnival. Well, that was too far away. And then there was a group in Sarnia, 2 hours from us, and they've been doing Snowfest was the name of theirs. They've been doing Snowfest for a number of years. So we connected with them. They helped us. And so from the summer, that summer of doing movies in the square till February, we planned to do a winter carnival. And here was the thinking. We felt like, and the city, her goal, Lori Dawn's goal, the city's goal was, if we could get 1,000 people to come to our winter carnival, which we called Frosty Fest. If we could get 1,000 people to come, that would be like a revival. That would be like, man, we haven't had 1,000 people in our downtown for years. So our goal is 1,000 people. We did Frosty Fest the first year. 8,000 people show up.
Wow.
So the first year was 8,000. The next year was 10,000, 10,000, 12,000. Year 5, 15,000 people come to Frosty Fest. And we're like looking around. And so at Frosty Fest, we always do a day that we bring the dignitaries in. So we bring the mayor and the MP and the MPP, and they're always just talking great about what we do. And so our mayor stands up on the stage in Harmony Square, year 5 of Frosty Fest, and says, this is a watershed moment of the transformation of our downtown. And this is Freedom House. We're a little church. Like, we're not a big church. We never became a big church. We're not today. But it was just living our values, what we felt were kingdom values of serving the city, because the city needed something to revitalize on downtown, to bring families together. We said we can do that. And so that elevated our connection in the city. So I just said, so now we're hanging out with the mayor and the MP and the MPP. And let me add a piece to what the mayor said that day. So he's standing on the Bell stage and he says this watershed moment. And then he says, and the place is packed. And he says, Brantford, do you know why Freedom House does this? This is our mayor. Do you know why Freedom House does this event? And I'm standing beside one of our people from the church. I said, I don't know if the mayor knows why we do this. And we do it because they need it and they asked us. But he says, they do it to show you the love of God in a practical way.
Oh, my God.
The love of God in a practical way. Now, Ian, here's the deal. I love standing up and telling people what we do on purpose and telling them why. But it's way better when the mayor tells your story.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was shocked he knew that, because that actually that was our tagline that we used. Like, we do these things to show you the love of God. So every act of kindness, by the way, people talk about random acts of kindness. They need to be way more intentional. We talk about intentional acts of kindness, because you should have a mindset change that we are the kindest people in our city, and we should be. Christians should be the kindest people. So, but we did it knowing that if we did this, what happens when you walk in kindness, it connects people's hearts, not their brains by talking. It connects to their hearts, and they want to know why. And so we wanted to have an answer every time. And our answer was, well, we want to show you the love of God in the practical way. And if God's speaking to them more, we have a conversation. If not, it's a seed to their lives. And either way, it's great. It's great. So yeah, that became pretty significant for us, for sure.
Brian, that was very significant with the political dimension in the city. Now, you served those. That was just amazing. I mean, you mentioned, you had 3 things that blew up with the church community, and yet when I've been engaged in Brantford, I mean, there's been up to 38 churches involved in the transformation of the city. How did you manage to rescue that back?
Yeah, so after the 3 crash and burns, we there were a number of people in that network, the pastors network, that they all still had that impetus from the late 90s. So it was probably 8 to 10 years, those three. Like, it wasn't like every other month we had a crash and burn. It was like 2000 crash and burn. No one talks for 2 or 3 years. Like, we still met together as pastors for soup and salad once a month, but with not tons of intention. So I would say it was about 3 sets of 3 years. So 8 or 9 years. And then the gentleman that was running the network resigned. A few of the people that were still part of the network, and I was still attending, but a few of the people that were attending came to me and said, Brian, would you chair this group? And I said, well, I'll only chair it if there's a desire for more from the churches than just soup and salad. And that's good. Building a relationship is vital, but it's a first start for something else. They all said yes. So they put my name up and I got, quote, voted in to run this ministerial. We took a full year to change the direction and the culture of the ministerial. So we went from the brand and we changed not everything about it, but we became more intentional. So we changed the name to One Church from Ephesians 4. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one church. We changed the plan, and so we had the name, and then the title. The tagline was that we were going to participate in the transformation of the city. And to me, that word participate, we actually talked a lot about that word, and it became very purposeful because it's not just about the church. It's that, but as the church and as one church in the city, we're going to be participating with government, with education, with those that want to see a good city. We're going to do that. And Ian, here's the deal. Everyone wants a good city. Everyone wants a safe city and a prosperous city. I don't care what your background or religion, it doesn't matter. I would say everyone wants that in their city. Some may have a different way to get there, but if you can be the solution-oriented group that will do that, that's important. So we chose that as One Church, and then we started doing events for the city. So we kept doing soup and salad and meeting monthly, but then we started doing leadership events for the leaders. Then we started doing a civic prayer breakfast for the civic leaders and the mayor. Then we started doing food drives, and it kind of brings it up to now. But even through COVID, One Church, we were doing food drives in the city. And in fact, it was a year before COVID, and we kept them going. But the year before COVID, One Church did the largest city food drive that had ever happened in the city, with a simple process of working just with a guy that had done this kind of thing before. So we wanted to be that group that led the way and bringing solutions to our city, and still do.
So, I mean, that's a heck of a journey, and a few mountains there to climb there, that's for sure. A few lions and bears to conquer. But in all of that, Brian, the pivotal points that now make you think and act differently, just give me 2 or 3 drivers that you don't do this now, you do this now. Why?
Yeah, so I would say that, so for a while, so I'll go back to pre-95. So the thinking of typical church, build a youth group, build a young adult group. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's part of what needs to happen. We should have great churches with great programs. But that's such a small piece of kingdom. So if you look at what one of the major catalysts for me was reading Lauren Cunningham's story. So Lauren Cunningham started YWAM, but going from when he started YWAM and his why he did that, but into his story from 1975 when God spoke to him about what now has become, known as 7 mountains or spheres, the discussion, but the story of that, about the understanding of getting involved in business, education, government intentionally. So his 7 mountains that he would say are the arts, business, church or religion, education, family, government, and media. clearly there's more than 7, and people can argue with that. And there's people talking about, are there mountains or spheres or whatever? I don't care. Ultimately, it's just to say that every person's calling, if God calls you to go to become involved in business, that's sacred. If God calls you to be a doctor in the medical field, that's sacred. If God calls you to go into government, that's sacred. So what makes something sacred is what Jesus says about it, not whether it's, well, now I'm a pastor or missionary, which typically up until that point we felt like we're the sacred callings. So that was really significant for me in the process of understanding those callings. Again, I've mentioned before Ed's writings and teaching, but then connecting with others that were doing it. We kind of laughed about the church getting it or not getting it. I find it funny that the church gets stuck. But when I talk about these things to people in business or government, that we should all work together, like that what you do in church is important, what you do over here is important. Like, they don't even hesitate. There's not even a hesitation to go, of course we need business involved. Of course we need government involved. Of course we want the church involved. We want all of those things happening. And so that was really important. And that's kind of what led us, or led me specifically, and then Freedom House, to start building a relationship with these people, like building a relationship with the mayor and building a relationship with the MP, and him saying, Brian, you should come on my strategic team because I like the way you think, I like the way you serve. To a business guy coming in saying, hey, I like what you're doing there. Let me help you build affordable housing. Like, it was just because you're involved and you want to care for the city. Like, that's what people want. They just do. And I've heard people argue for years, Ian, about, well, we can't be Christian in the marketplace. Well, that's not true. Just, you can be a Christian, just don't be an idiot. Like, Christians have become known as being idiots for a long time in the marketplace because we use people. We use business people. We use government people. It's like, we pay your salary, you should give us money. It's like, man, I've heard in over coffee with key leaders in cities how much they've been hurt by the church. And so we set out to try to, as much as possible, change that trajectory with having kingdom lifestyle.
Brian, that's absolutely fantastic and absolutely fabulous. Look, we're excited at Kingdomize Global to serve you. Brian's finished off with some very meaty topics there, and I know we are going to explore more of that in the future. But we're just signing off now. We'll be with you again soon. We've got other interviews with Bruce Friesen and Bruce Mann and other founders of our organization to help you to understand it's possible to be kingdomized. It's possible to make a difference. It's possible to impact your world, and we want to support you in doing that. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us today on Kingdomize the podcast. Let's keep the discussion going throughout the week on our socials or on our website, kingdomizeglobal.com. Contact us today to see how we can walk together to see more of God's kingdom in your city as it is in heaven.